The long-awaited breaking point in the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan has finally arrived, but it brings with it a dark and complex twist that few saw coming. Canadian police have officially arrested 34-year-old Daniel Martell, the stepfather of the two Nova Scotian preschoolers, who vanished without a trace in May 2025. While the community has been holding its breath for an update that leads to the children, this arrest is a bombshell for reasons that are as legally tactical as they are disturbing. If you have been following the heartbreaking disappearance of these siblings from their family home in Lansdown Station, you know that the investigation has been frustratingly stagnant for months. However, the status of this case just shifted on its axis. On a Monday that will likely be remembered as the turning point of the entire saga, the RCMP confirmed they took Martell into custody. But here is the catch. It is still far too early to declare this case closed. In fact, the legal reality of the situation is incredibly nuanced because the specific charges currently leveled against Daniel Martell do not relate directly to the disappearance of Lilly and Jack. Instead, Martell is facing a trio of serious criminal allegations: sexual assault, and forcible confinement. As a deception detective and an attorney trained in the meticulous art of statement analysis, I look at these developments through a lens of behavioral patterns and legal strategy. This channel is dedicated to exposing lies and manipulation, and today, we are diving deep into how the Canadian police might be playing a high-stakes game of chess to finally crack this case wide open. To understand where we are going, we have to look at where Martell was when the nightmare began. He was living in that Lansdown home with Lilly, Jack, and their mother, Malia Brooks Murray, at the exact moment the children went missing last May. The woods surrounding that property were searched for grueling days, and the RCMP Major Crimes Unit has been relentless. Yet the case remained classified as a non-criminal missing persons investigation. Until now. The victim in this new criminal case against Martell is described by police only as an adult, with no further details provided to the public. However, the timing is impossible to ignore. Just days before this arrest, unsealed court documents revealed a massive rift in the family narrative. Malia Brooks Murray, the children's mother, had officially accused Martell of physical abuse. This brings us to a critical intersection of psychology and criminal profiling. Spousal abuse is statistically and frequently correlated with child abuse. If the unnamed victim in these new charges is indeed Malia, Daniel's legal standing is crumbling. If the victim is someone else entirely, the situation is arguably even more dire for his defense, as it would suggest a pattern of predatory behavior involving multiple women within a single year. When confronted with these allegations in past interviews, Martell's denials were oddly specific and, frankly, problematic from a linguistic standpoint. He claimed the allegations were merely an attempt to paint him in a bad light, and insisted he never physically abused Malia. To a statement analyst, that is a red flag. Much like the famous hair-splitting denials we have seen in high-profile political scandals, using subjective terms like physical abuse allows a person to hide behind their own personal definition of the word while avoiding the hard truth of their actions. The shift from a missing persons case to a criminal investigation involving the primary person of interest is a massive tactical advantage for the RCMP, even if the charges seem unrelated on the surface. Up until this point, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan has been handled with a certain level of procedural politeness. Because it wasn't officially a criminal case, the police were often reliant on the voluntary cooperation of the family. We heard Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon state clearly that none of the family members were considered suspects, a move that likely served to keep the lines of communication open. But the arrest of Daniel Martell on charges of sexual assault and forcible confinement changes the rules of engagement entirely. Under the Canadian Criminal Code, a criminal charge unlocks hard powers that are unavailable in a standard missing person search. We are talking about production orders, the Canadian equivalent of a subpoena, which means the authorities no longer have to ask for Martell's permission to dig into his life. In the past, Martell has made a public show of his cooperation, often pointing to the fact that he provided a DNA sample to forensics regarding Lilly's blanket, which was found in the woods shortly after the disappearance. He was quoted saying he was willing to do it because they didn't need a warrant, and he wanted that box checked for no criminal involvement. However, a deeper look at his behavior suggests that he only cooperates when he feels he has no other choice, or when he feels he can control the narrative. He has been vocal about his reputation, complaining that the public viewed him as a monster or evil. By focusing on his image rather than the urgency of finding the children, Martell has displayed classic signs of deceptive deflection. Now that he is facing charges for assaulting an adult, the police have the legal leverage to seize his phone, search his digital footprint, and re-examine his property without needing him to sign a single consent form. The mystery of Lilly and Jack's disappearance has gained international media attention, largely because of how clean the scene appeared to be. If Daniel Martell is innocent and as desperate to find the children as he claims, he should have been the one demanding this be treated as a criminal case from day one. If he truly believes his partner, Malia, might be involved or lying, a criminal investigation would be the only way to compel the truth from her. Instead, he seemed relieved whenever the police checked the box of no criminal involvement. His story of drifting in and out of sleep while the children vanished is a vacuum of information that police are now finally equipped to fill. While the RCMP officially states that the pivot to a criminal investigation for the children specifically only happens once a suspect is identified in that crime, the current assault charges provide the backdoor evidence needed to find the truth. We have to ask, why would a man who claims to love these children be so resistant to the rigors of a criminal probe? The answer often lies in what is hidden in the places the police haven't been allowed to look. Until this Monday, the investigation is no longer just about searching the woods. It is about searching the life of Daniel Martell. To understand the current legal predicament of Daniel Martell, we have to look closely at the documents that were shielded from the public eye until very recently. In a case involving missing children, information is often tightly controlled by the RCMP to protect the integrity of the investigation. However, the unsealing of certain court records has provided a window into the volatile household where Lilly and Jack Sullivan were living before they vanished. These documents contain allegations from Malia Brooks Murray, the children's mother, claiming that Martell was physically abusive toward her. This is a critical development because, in the world of statement analysis and criminal profiling, domestic violence is rarely an isolated behavior. It often serves as a baseline for how an individual handles conflict and control within a family unit. If Martell was indeed using force to silence or control Malia, the implications for the missing children are staggering. When these redactions were lifted, Martell's public response was telling. He didn't just deny the abuse. He attempted to reframe the entire narrative around his own victimhood. He stated that he approved of the redactions being lifted, a classic move used by manipulative personalities to appear transparent when they are actually backed into a corner. His logic was that his reputation was already so tarnished that the specific details of the abuse allegations wouldn't change the public's perception of him as a monster. But this is a deflection. By focusing on his image and the narrative painted by the public, he avoids addressing the specific, factual nature of the charges, sexual assault and forcible confinement. In my experience as an attorney and a deception detective, when a person focuses on how they are being perceived rather than the truth of the incident, they are often more concerned with social survival than actual innocence. Martell's denial of the abuse was incredibly nuanced. He said, "I never physically abused Malia." This is what we call a qualifying statement. By adding the word physically, he creates a loophole for himself. Does he consider pushing to be physical abuse? Does he consider blocking her from leaving a room or taking her phone to be physical abuse? If his personal definition of abuse only includes causing visible injury, he can say he never physically abused her while still being guilty of the specific behaviors that led to a charge of forcible confinement. This linguistic maneuvering is almost identical to the famous semantic dens used by public figures to avoid perjury while still being deceptive. When a reporter asked him if he had ever tried to block Malia or hold her down, his answer was a flat no, followed by the claim that the allegations were only made to paint him in a bad light. This shift from a direct answer to a motive-based explanation is a major red flag. Instead of simply stating the truth, he attacks the motive of the accuser. This is why the arrest on Monday is so significant. The police have moved past the stage of asking for his version of the truth. They are now operating on the basis of evidence that was strong enough to convince a judge to issue an arrest warrant. While the public continues to search the woods of Nova Scotia, the legal system is finally searching the character of the man who was last seen with those children. Every word he has spoken in these interviews is now being weighed against the cold, hard facts of a criminal record. A recurring theme in Daniel Martell's public defense is his insistence that he has been fully cooperative with the RCMP. He often points to the fact that he provided a DNA sample and signed a consent form as proof of his innocence. He even went as far as to say it was nice to see that box checked regarding no criminal involvement in the case of Lilly and Jack. However, a closer look at his statements reveals a much more calculated approach to cooperation. Martell seems to cooperate only when the police offer him something in return, specifically the reassurance that he is not a suspect. He noted that the police didn't need a warrant to have his DNA, so he was willing to do it. This suggests that his cooperation is not born out of a desperate desire to find his stepchildren, but rather a strategic calculation of what the police could obtain regardless of his consent. If he knew the police could eventually get a warrant for his DNA, volunteering, it allows him to claim the moral high ground of a cooperative parent while actually just conceding to the inevitable. This brings us to the core of the police strategy. For months, the RCMP Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon has maintained that no family members are suspects. While this may have seemed frustrating to the public, it was likely a tactical necessity. By keeping the case classified as a missing persons investigation rather than a criminal investigation, the police were able to keep Martell talking. In a criminal case, a suspect has the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney, which often shuts down the flow of information. By playing nice and checking those boxes of non-criminal involvement, the police kept Martell in a position where he felt comfortable speaking to the media and to investigators. But that comfort has now been stripped away. The arrest for assault and forcible confinement effectively ends the consent phase of the investigation. The police no longer need to convince Daniel to let them look at his phone or his home. They now have the criminal leverage to take what they need. There is a glaring contradiction in Martell's behavior that cannot be ignored. He claims that Malia, the mother of the children, is making false allegations against him to ruin his reputation. If he truly believes she is a liar capable of fabricating crimes as serious as sexual assault and confinement, why would he trust her account of the day the children disappeared? On that day, Martell claims he was drifting in and out of sleep while the children were supposedly under Malia's care. If she is as deceptive as he claims, an innocent man would be begging the police to turn this into a criminal investigation to uncover what she might be hiding. Instead, Martell has been the loudest advocate for keeping the case non-criminal. This suggests that the current status quo, where no one is a suspect and no one is being compelled to tell the truth under the threat of prosecution, is exactly where he wanted to be. But the Monday arrest has shattered that status quo. The box for no criminal involvement has been unchecked by his own alleged actions. As he prepares for his court date on March 2nd in Pictou Provincial Court, the pressure is mounting. The police are no longer just looking for Lilly and Jack. They are looking for the truth that Daniel Martell has been working so hard to paint over. While much of the recent focus has been on Daniel Martell's arrest and his linguistic gymnastics, we cannot ignore the other central figure in this tragedy, Malia Brooks Murray. As a deception detective, I often receive comments from viewers asking why the spotlight seems to shine so brightly on the stepfather while the mother remains in the periphery. Some point to a specific haunting detail from the early days of the disappearance, the report that Malia was seen picking up sticks in the yard the very day after her children were reported missing. To those critics, I have a very clear answer. I have analyzed Malia, and she was actually the subject of the very first video in this investigative series. Based on that initial interview she gave, my professional determination was that she was definitely involved in some capacity. However, there is a massive tactical difference between the way Daniel and Malia have handled the aftermath of Lilly and Jack's disappearance. Since that first interview, Malia has remained almost entirely silent. She has not made public statements, she has not sought out the media to defend her reputation, and she has not engaged in the kind of defensive posturing we see from Daniel. This silence is suspicious in its own right, but it also makes it harder to conduct ongoing statement analysis. Daniel, on the other hand, cannot seem to stop talking. He is constantly trying to manage the public's perception of him, which provides a wealth of verbal data to dissect. But the recent allegations of abuse changed the context of Malia's silence. If she was indeed a victim of forcible confinement and assault at the hands of Martell, her silence might not be a sign of guilt, but a sign of trauma or coercion. This is the gray area where the police have to operate. If Malia is willing to lie to the police about Daniel's character, as he claims, then the entire foundation of the missing person narrative is built on sand. How can we trust the timeline of the day the kids disappeared if it was provided by two people who are now legally at odds over allegations of violence and confinement? The picking up sticks incident is often cited by the public as odd behavior, but in a criminal investigation, odd isn't enough to make a case. You need leverage. The RCMP strategy has likely been to wait for one of these two individuals to break. By arresting Martell on charges unrelated to the children, the police have created a pressure cooker environment. If Malia is the victim of these alleged crimes, she is now in a position where she might feel safe enough to tell the truth about what happened to Lilly and Jack. Conversely, if Daniel feels he is being framed for assault, he might decide to stop protecting the family unit and point the finger elsewhere. This is the classic prisoner's dilemma in criminal law. The police are using the assault case as a wedge to drive between the two people who know exactly what happened in that Lansdown home. The mystery of the Sullivan siblings isn't just a search for two children in the woods. It is a search for the crack in the story that Daniel and Malia have maintained for nearly a year. As a deception detective, my job is to look past the sticks and the blankets and focus on the power dynamics and the lies that have kept this case from being solved. As we look toward Daniel Martell's upcoming appearance in Pictou Provincial Court on March 2nd, the stakes could not be higher. This is no longer just a local story about a family tragedy in Nova Scotia. It has become a masterclass in how modern criminal investigations use indirect leverage to solve direct crimes. The reporter Ali Thompson noted that while the disappearance itself is still not a criminal case, the assault charges against Martell are very much criminal. This distinction is the key to everything that happens next. The RCMP Major Crimes Unit has been conducting an extensive investigation for months, but they have been hamstrung by the lack of a predicate crime, a legal reason to ignore Martell's rights to privacy. Now, they have that reason. Every text message, every deleted photo, and every location data point on Martell's phone is now fair game for investigators. If there is a smoking gun that connects the stepfather to the disappearance of Lilly and Jack, it will likely be found in the digital or physical evidence seized during this arrest. Daniel's defense has always been that he was asleep and uninvolved. He even claimed it was nice to have the box checked for no criminal involvement. But that box is now officially unchecked. The public narrative he fought so hard to control, the one where he is the cooperative stepfather unfairly maligned by a judgmental public, is gone. He is now a man facing charges of sexual assault and forcible confinement. If the police play their cards right, as I mentioned at the start of this analysis, they will use these charges to squeeze the truth out of the silence that has plagued this case since May 2025. This is a bombshell because it removes the mask of the concerned parent and replaces it with the reality of a criminal defendant. We have to remember that Lilly and Jack are the true victims here, and every legal maneuver, every statement analysis, and every police tactic is ultimately about bringing them home or finding justice for what happened to them. The disappearance of the Sullivan siblings remains one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking cases in recent Canadian history. But for the first time in nearly a year, the momentum has shifted. The police are no longer playing nice with a man who claims he was just a bystander in his own home. They are treating him as a person capable of violence and confinement. Whether this leads directly to the children or simply exposes the web of lies that has surrounded their disappearance, it is a necessary step toward the truth. If you want me to continue analyzing this case as the court dates approach and more evidence is unsealed, let me know by liking, commenting, and sharing this video. Your engagement helps keep the spotlight on Lilly and Jack, ensuring they are not forgotten as the legal battle against Daniel Martell begins. Until next time, stay observant, stay skeptical, and above all, stay true. The truth has a way of coming out, even when it's buried deep in the woods or hidden behind a carefully crafted denial. We will be here to break it down when it does.